Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Laura Cohen, and I'm the Executive Director of the Harriet and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Center at Queensborough Community College at the City University of New York in Bayside, Queens. Our mission is to use the lessons of the Holocaust to educate current and future generations about the ramifications of prejudice, racism, and stereotyping. Today's professional development workshop is entitled An Introduction to Discussion-Based Pedagogy of Transformative Text. Our speakers include Queensborough Community College English Department members Dr. Ilse Schreinemakers and Professor Susan Lago, who will introduce you to the pedagogy of the Great Questions Foundation, founded by faculty at Austin Community College. The Kupferberg Holocaust Center in Bayside, New York, is situated on the traditional land of the Mantinecock people who continue to live here today. We offer gratitude and respect to all of the indigenous people of Turtle Island, past, present, and future, including the Lenape and Shinnecock peoples. Our event today is part of the 2025-26 Harriet and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Center and National Endowment for the Humanities Colloquium, Resistance, Resilience, and Reinvention, Artists and Academics Escaping Nazism. After the presentation, please be sure to submit your questions via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And now it's my pleasure to introduce two of this year's KHC NEH Faculty Fellows, Dr. Beth Cunahan and Professor Allison Chimino. Dr. Cunahan is professor in QCC's English department and has been a full-time member of the department for 24 years, active in teaching and coordinating high-impact practices, college and university science, and pedagogical scholarship. She serves on the college's faculty executive committee, was co-deputy chair of the English department and chair of the department's faculty mentoring committee, was a member of the University Faculty Summit, and currently serves on the department's reading committee. Dr. Cunahan's scholarship includes numerous National Two-Year College Association presentations on nature-infused curriculum and reading in the community college classroom, and was a corresponding co-author of a chapter about the QCC Common Read initiatives in the 2017 text, What is College Reading? Professor Chimino teaches composition and creative writing at QCC as a full-time lecturer in English and holds an MFA from Texas State University. For many years, she facilitated poetry workshops for educators through Lesley University's education program, Division of Creative Arts and Learning, where she taught a graduate class in arts integrated learning and poetry. Her poems have appeared in Hunger Mountain Review, 30 Days, The Best of the 3030 Project, Ibbotson Street, Oberon Magazine, and other journals. Her essays, Arts Integrated Learning Through Poetry, Implementing Awareness, Metaphor, and Play Across Curriculums, was published in Poetry Across the Curriculum, New Methods of Writing-Intensive Pedagogy for U.S. Community College and Undergraduate Education. Dr. Cunahan and Professor Chimino, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. We'd like to welcome everyone who's attending right now and everyone who will be watching in the future. We'd really like to thank Dr. Cohen and Barana Soman of the KHC for giving us this opportunity to bring this approach to everyone in the Queensborough and KHC community. I'm also involved in the Great Questions Foundation. I'm part of the cohort with Professor Lago and Dr. Schreinemakers. And we felt that their mission of having discussion-based pedagogy of transformative texts kind of fits our theme that we're focusing on the artists and academics who escaped or unfortunately were not able to escape Nazism. And so we felt that this approach is a rich one for the classroom if faculty are working with texts that speak to our theme or really any theme, and especially those within the Great Questions. Allison.
Thank you. It's a great honor and joy to introduce Professor Susan Lago. Susan Lago teaches courses in composition and literature with a focus on environmental humanities, student-centered discussion, and experiential learning. In 2018, she attended a Teagle grant-funded CUNY Core Common Summer Institute at Ostos Community College to develop a community's curriculum that focused on classic works, an initiative based on Columbia University's Common Core. The objective was to bring the questions raised by these texts to community college students. From 2019 to 2020, she conducted a study about how a nature theme-based humanities writing course leads to an increased sense of responsibility for the human impact on natural environments in local and urban communities. The study focused on learning outcomes of composition classes that assigned Walden, in addition to embarking on a class nature walk. From 2018 to 2021, she spearheaded a CUNY grant-funded OER Great Books Initiative, and in 2023 was awarded the QCC Sandra Palmer Award for Teaching Excellence based on her discussion-based experiential curriculum for a nature-themed composition course.
Dr. Ilse Schrenemakers currently serves as co-deputy chair of the English department. She's been a faculty member at Queensborough since 2015. And for the past 4 years, she has coordinated, along with colleagues, the department's Welcome Read program, which aims to create a community of learners for first semester college students. She has been the recipient of the National Endowment for the Humanities grant in 2014. Actually, no, that was 2024, yes, to expand the Welcome Read program at the college. At the present time, Dr. Schreinemakers is a faculty fellow now with the Great Questions Foundation, and that work brought the National Youth Poet Laureate to campus this past spring.
Please join us in a moment of silence to remember those impacted by the Holocaust. Thank you.
Okay, so now we pass it over to Professor Lago and Dr. Schreinemakers. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our workshop, an introduction to discussion-based pedagogy of transformative texts. Thank you to the KHC and Dr. Cohen, and thank you to Dr. Cunahan and Professor Chimino for inviting Dr. Schreinemakers and I to share this pedagogy with you today.
Yes, welcome, and thank you everybody for coming here today. I'll be sharing a little bit about the Great Questions Foundation with you all. And if you're looking for more information about the organization, as well as the numerous opportunities available to faculty teaching at community colleges, we have the QR code for you there on the screen. But to share with you what's on the slide here, the Great Questions Foundation really seeks to promote liberal education and core text and discussion-based learning at the community college. And to share a little bit of their vision with you all, the organizers believe that confronting transformative texts, which we'll get to in a little bit, learning from them and questioning them while allowing them to question us, enables us to think more constructively and critically about our world. In this way, it's looking for students to find their voices while they are listened to respectfully and encouraged to engage. We'll also talk a little bit about how that happens in a minute. Given that 44% of undergraduates are enrolled in public two-year institutions, strengthening the humanities at the community college is perceived as essential. And so the vision of the Great Questions Foundation is they want to increase by 25% the number of students who transfer from community colleges to four-year institutions, majoring in humanities disciplines by 2035. Susan, over to you.
So just to talk a little bit about our grant, Dr. Schreinemakers invited me and Dr. Cunahan to apply to the Great Questions Foundation with her. It was quite an extensive application process, and we found out we were awarded the two-year fellowship, and it's divided into semesters. So in the first semester, that was the professional development semester. We had several Zoom workshops with the other 5 cohorts from around the country. Each cohort is referred to as a team, and each team has anywhere between 3 or 4 members. They're from humanities departments, not just English departments, so from community colleges. And so some of them, there's quite a lot from English, but also from history, philosophy, and political science, as well as I think disciplines like music. So we had the Zoom sessions. They flew us out to Austin, where we went through in-person workshops that were very intensive in the student focused, discussion-based learning. And we started putting together our ideas for inviting Stephanie Pacheco, the National Youth Poet Laureate, which was Ilsa's great idea, to come to our campus. And in spring of 2025, she was able to come to campus. She spoke to our students. I think we had about 150 people there. The chancellor, the CUNY chancellor came, and it was a really fabulous event, very inspiring. And now in fall 2025, we are teaching our curriculum, kind of working out the kinks. And then in the spring, we will refine it and assess amongst ourselves, as well as the Great Questions Foundation. Ilsa, can you think of anything I left out?
No, I just wanted to add a little bit about each of these different parts, if that's okay. So,
Yeah.
in Austin, they convened us all not only to kind of get to know each other, so that it was more personal during the Zoom workshops, which I thought was a nice idea, but also they wanted to hear from us about any problems at our host institutions with really advancing ideas that we had to strengthen the humanities, so we could kind of problem solve together. And we put sort of we shared that all together and got a sense of what was going on in community colleges, or not just in our own institution, but across the United States. So I thought that was really helpful. And then in spring 2025, with Stephanie's event, that turned into a much bigger event than we anticipated. It caught the attention of the chancellor. It was written up in the New York Times, and she debuted a new poem called Dear CUNY, and we have that there for you. And part of the going into fall 2025 course redesign is really thinking about how we can bring discussion-based pedagogy front and center. We might all be used to, sure, we have discussions in our classrooms. Great Questions Foundation admits this is not necessarily a new idea, but how can we make it front and central to the student experience? So I just wanted to add that.
So these are the 10 great questions that you can find on the Great Questions Foundation website. These are by far not the only quote unquote great questions you can ask, but they are questions that have been asked since, in the words of our students, the dawn of time, and include questions like, who am I? How do individuals know what they know? What is the good life and how do you live it? And these questions really open up the classroom to some insightful and rigorous discussions in responding to each other, but also the texts that they have been asked to read. It is a way of including those texts in the conversation.
Right. And it's also nice because these questions can be answered really by any student in the classroom, regardless of their prior educational experiences or backgrounds. It's a nice way to bring the class together to give them the central focus. So in the past, I would focus my classes on themes, but after being part of this fellowship, I'm now gearing my units towards more of these broader questions, so that I invite the students to also ask these types of questions.
There's many quote unquote transformative texts listed on the Great Questions Foundation website, and they include texts by Aristotle, by Maya Angelou, Frederick Douglass. So they're not just canonical, but they're the maybe more updated canonical texts. This is really our interpretation of transformative texts. Maybe Elsa could say a little bit about hers. Beth is teaching on tyranny. I have been teaching Walden by Henry David Thoreau for several semesters, but teaching it with the Great Questions pedagogy has really enriched, I believe, the student experience and engagement with this text. Did anybody want to add anything about their text?
Right. So I've taught this text, Evocative Objects, edited by Sherry Turkle before, but given the opportunity to redesign my curriculum, I thought to bring it back. It nicely tied in with an event that we had with the welcome read about what would you bring. I started this unit just recently. So the question that I'm using to frame the discussion is, what is the good life and how would you live it? But through the lens of the stuff of our lives. And so we began the conversation with the class. So framing it, this discussion about objects that gather meaning and represent different phases of our lives and also the inner life, like how can we then explore that to this great question? So it opens up sort of rich critical thinking in ways that I probably wouldn't have thought of before.
So just to kind of simplify the Great Questions pedagogy, and then we'll get more into more detail in the following slides. It is student-centered, meaning that the students have agency over the discussion. It is discussion based, and for the first time, we are really, at least for me, assessing student discussion in the classroom, and it really encourages deep reading of transformative text. But as Ilsa pointed out, they could really participate in this discussion if they didn't have such a deep reading of the text. So it really does include everybody in the conversation. And again, it asks learners to really consider these questions that have been asked, for the ages. And then we have more details on the next few slides.
Yeah. Okay. And just to add two little points to that is that one of the designs of the foundation is also to redesign high enrollment courses that fulfill core curriculum, general education requirements to have this pedagogy be driving how we teach those types of courses. So, okay. So when we convened in Austin, they shared with us and had us replicate, or model, might be a better word, how to implement a Great Questions discussion. What does that mean? How do we create an inclusive classroom where all students, not just extroverts and chatty students, are given an opportunity to feel heard and listened to, and also engaged and excited about the process? So the traditional method that they shared with us, traditional in the sense that this is how it operates in Austin, Texas, is to create groups. Okay, we do that, right? We do that already. Divide the class into groups. Each group can be given a color or number or name, and each student in the group is given a specific number. And every group has the same list of questions for that class period. So the students gather into groups, and each group member selects a question of interest and writes for a duration of time. So a timer is set, and they had us do that together. We have group listening and note taking. Once the time is up, in numerical order, each student shares responses. So while one student is talking, other students are listening and taking notes. After every student has spoken, students ask each other questions to each other. Then the class regroups. Instructor asks for specific pairings to report back to the class. So, for example, in the blue group, student number 3 shares something interesting that student number 1 said, and so on. And then the discussion takes off from there. Susan,
And just to add a little bit,
sure.
I think that the taking the notes part, it's good for the students who maybe don't think as quickly when, to put up their hands, the quieter students, because now they have something to look at. They've written something down, and they don't have to just think on their feet.
Right. And also, I think that using this numbered system makes it doesn't put students necessarily in the spotlight or depend upon instructor remembering students' names. It creates a very inclusive, like everybody gets a chance to speak. They know when they're going to be speaking in numerical order. But also the leaving that time to ask questions is important too, because then I think it sends the message, hopefully, that their ideas are evolving, and their ideas are evolving because of being in the company of others and being in conversation with others. And having the classroom discussion about what did you find interesting puts less pressure on finding the answer, giving the answer that's going to please the instructor, but makes it more about, well, hey, what's the conversation that you had together? Please share. I'm interested and engaged. So a variation on this. So part of the fellowship opportunity was to hear from other faculty, like what's working in their other classrooms. And so there was one that really stood out from a faculty member in LA. And she wanted the students to, actually, probably should begin with the next slide. She wanted students to create the questions themselves. And so she started off with, and we're sharing that with you, what is a good question? Like, what is a good way to enter a text? And so the barometer would be to have a question that stimulates conversation, focuses on something specific, can be understood easily by everyone, right? Sometimes there's this understanding that if I'm in college now, I'm going to use certain vocabulary words, but it still should be understood easily. Not solicit yes and no answers, and provoke thought or personal response or interpretation. And then, so they're asked to create questions to a specific text by a certain deadline, and they must be crafted by them and fulfill the requirements given on the previous slide. So she gives samples of weak questions and samples of stronger questions. And I tried this most recently with my class, and we put on the board the types of questions that students were creating. We revised them. We worked together to make them stronger. I found it an effective strategy. I had students coming up to me during break time to ask if I could look at their questions. Were their questions good enough? And then I'm going to send them to the discussion board to actually answer their own questions. Susan?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that. So, in addition to the Austin convening, we had a second convening in Miami, where we were tasked with bringing a question activity, a student-centered discussion-based question activity. And we experienced it from the learner perspective. And this is one of the one that also shared, but there were other ones that were also really interesting and got students engaged, or at least got us engaged in the conversation. Some that required students to move physically around the room. So it was a very, very interesting time.
Okay, so I just want to also share some of the big picture strategies if we do decide to revise some of our curriculum to include this discussion-based pedagogy, and assessment of how that discussion-based pedagogy is working. I have here in front of you a couple quotes from the founder of the Great Questions Foundation, who himself went to a college, St. John's, which had a great books core curriculum. And he's very passionate about bringing that type of curriculum into the community colleges, what's usually reserved for more elite institutions. And what you see in front of you is the quotes that kind of drive that decision. him saying that discussion-based classrooms mirror how citizens work together in a healthy democratic society. The ability to engage in productive and collegial conversations and disagreements about matters that arise in the study of these subjects is an essential skill for citizens of a pluralistic republic like our own, and one which is underdeveloped in our time. The diversity of the community college classroom makes an ideal place for students to practice these skills. And given the number of students who are enrolled in community colleges, it's the best place to encourage and develop the pedagogical skills faculty need to help them do it well.
So we thought it could be interesting, like we did in our convenings, to practice this. So we have a QR code there that's going to, if you scan it with your phone, it should take you to a poem by Ilya Kaminsky. He is speaking, I believe it's on the 21st, as part of this KHC NEH colloquium. And this will take you to his poem In the Time of Peace. And we would like you to read it and then consider it in the context of the great question, what is the good life and how do I live it? And then do a little writing towards that. Actually, we have the directions on the next slide, along with the QR code again. And then we'll we're not going to break into smaller groups. If you were doing it in a class, you'd break into smaller groups, but then we'll open it up to a group discussion.
It's interesting too to me because I have been teaching this poem with Ilya Kaminsky coming so soon on, and it will be on Zoom. So we invite others to come, but I hadn't thought about it so specifically in terms of this question. And what I found so powerful in writing about it in What is the Good Life and How Do I Live It is I wrote, in the context of this question, we can see the irony in the poem. It is a peaceful country, but a boy has been shot in broad daylight, and the citizens record the horror on their phones. The nakedness of the whole nation, we watch others watch. The good life involves freedom and safety of body and simple things, family, dentists, basil. We see the inequity and hypocrisy of our country. And Kaminsky challenges us to avoid complacency, to avoid what King called a negative peace that favors order over justice. And what Rilke writes, there is no place that does not see us. We must change our lives. And so thinking about that in terms of that great question, it did allow me an entry into the poem that I hadn't really thought of even in teaching it. And so I will be bringing this back to my classroom, and I thank you very much for it.
Thank you so much for sharing, Professor Cimino. Do we have anything in the Q&A that we could share that somebody can see?
Not yet.
Okay, well, if it's all right, I'll go next. Hard to follow Allison with an analysis of a poem, but I too found the framing with the question very helpful. And actually, I was using a technique another poetry teacher taught me a long time ago, which is to follow a certain word. So I was following the pronoun it and also the word watch in light of this question. And I thought it was so interesting, the switch from kind of watching on the phones and then watching in that very last stanza to be watching in real time and observant of the present and the world around us. And that seemed to tie really well with this question of what is the good life. And then tracing the pronoun it, like it is a peaceful country, going back to what Allison was talking about. But then when it says it clips our citizens' bodies, wondering if that's the same it, or like what kind of statement is being made there, and how that is destroying our notion or interfering with our notion of a good life. So that's all I have for now.
I'm able to see some of the Q&As. So Ursula, she responded that good life is a walk on the beach in the morning. Good life is a walk around a pool at lunch. Good life is a conversation with the one I love in the evening. Good life is being free, at least at heart. And the format I'm looking at looks like maybe she wrote it as a poem. I think so. And then Joel in the Q&A, he says, the good life is one of quiet reflection, but good seems to be the absence of conflict or its lessening by distraction and design, having no turbulence to draw down emotions or turbulence like a flower that opens in the morning to the sun. That space between the flower and the sun, which also disrupts, kills even. That small space like the shadow of a satellite racing across the globe like an eagle on a ridge, its shadow burned into the leaves which re-oil. The good life is finding that space and noting it and keeping it after it is gone, which is also very poetic as well. Oh, recoil. Thank you, Joel. Yes, beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, how about if we do this just to kind of maybe close the loop? Could Ursula and Joel, would you like, and Allison and Ilsa, since you all volunteered the good life, your good life, could you each just make a note of something somebody else said in the Q&A, something that caught your attention, even if you don't remember who said it? Ilsa, it looks like you responded, but you responded in the chat, and I don't think I can. Oh, wait, I can see it. Never mind. So Ilsa noted Allison's phrasing of avoid complacency. That's what stood out to her. And also Joel's point to keeping the space after it's gone. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else have something they want to share?
I see Beth's is I like hearing how asking a great question as a way to enter the text inspires new readings. And I wrote Joel's absence of conflict or its lessening. And I also noticed Ursula's walk around the pond.
Thank you so much, Allison. So while we're wrapping this up, if anybody else has something they want to put in another reflection, we can come back to it. But this is just really a very brief way that you could use the great questions into a difficult text. And poems for students, as we might know, can present challenges to them, but also difficult texts in terms of the subject matter. Talking to students about the Holocaust, especially students who may not be familiar, can be a challenging thing to talk to them about, or giving them a text having to do with the Holocaust. And these great questions and focusing on the students and their questions and the students and their reflections could be a way to create a space for them to talk about these more challenging texts.
I just want to also underscore the value in having students report back what other students have said rather than just giving voice to their own opinions and reflections, because it creates a dynamic between the students rather than between the students and the professor. So I've enjoyed that very much.
I just wanted to add, from my perspective, working with the activity to create a question, I had the class, each student create a question and pull out a quote from the reading for that class. Then I put them into small groups. No, then I switched them. So you had somebody else's. Then I put them into small groups and they discussed the questions and the quotes and chose which ones would be the most, that generated the most conversation amongst them. And that really worked very well because it helped them to keep focus on the text while they were focusing on discussing the question that also led to a discussion of the text. But maybe to segue into Q&A now, would be the challenge is getting the whole class to speak, to try to, so moving from the small group to bring out the whole class. And that's where I feel I need to maybe develop more classroom trust and comfort with speaking aloud, because that's always been a challenge for us, when you just have a couple of students talk a lot. But with the Great Questions approach, we're really making discussion as part of the participation grade, right? We're assessing it as well. So wondering if we could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Just to add a little bit to that, I was really attracted to this type of pedagogy in the age of AI, right? So turning some type of assessment to what students are doing in the classroom in real time. And a lot of the solutions have been, which I've tried as well, like writing in blue books, doing their essays in blue books, and those are all great. But really putting the emphasis on their voice in the classroom and being present in the classroom and engaging with each other as part of their assessment for the course. And so being part of this fellowship has made me rethink the value in that, especially with all that's happening now in the age of AI.
For me, I think having students do a little writing, I think I mentioned this before. If they do some writing towards the question, if I find they're a little bit more confident in answering if they have, at least for some students. Some students don't mind just talking, but other students do better if they have something to read that they've written. And I find well, one thing I do actually in this format is I sit down, which might seem like a small thing, but I move around a lot when I teach. So I sit and I try to sit in a desk, so I'm not sitting above them. So I'm sitting in the circle or I'm sitting on their level. And that works better in some classrooms than others logistically. We had a question in the Q&A from Robin. She says, thank you so much for this presentation. Many great ideas. My question, in a writing course, how would you leverage this pedagogy in for a formal writing or research essay? Curious if you task students with addressing the great questions or if you tweak or focus the assignment more specifically.
That is a great question. Thank you. But yeah, for me, yeah, that's a part of the course redesign. That's part of the fellowship. So, Robin, I hope I'm answering your question. But I did make how we have like topics for our essays that we assign. I did make the great question the central topic. And so then any types of readings that they were going to bring into their essay prompt was inviting them to contemplate this great question. And then their thesis had to speak to that. And then I have the online discussion board, them creating their own questions with this great question in mind and writing them. And so those tasks become part of the material that they will hopefully consider for writing for their essays. So it is scaffolded in, that's the approach I take, is a more scaffolded approach.
I did tweak the question a little bit in the essay they had to write. So the question that's providing the kind of focus for my English comp class this semester is, how do individuals know what they know? And to help them answer that question, we are reading Walden. And so for the first essay they wrote, I tweaked the question that instead of individuals, I asked, how do you know what you know? And what was so interesting is that they interpreted the you as like, yeah, like how do people know what they know? And still couldn't answer the question for how they knew what they knew. not all of them, but some of them. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But I think that I will ask the class question again at the end of the semester, maybe for the research project. I haven't figured that piece out yet.
I did have a question, actually. Thank you all so much for this. I noticed that our NEH fellow, Dr. Zelker, is here, and he's in the philosophy department. I noticed that Dr. Ursula, I'm going to mess up your name, I'm sorry. Gabrowski is here as well, and some professors in math and science. And there is such a push to really, I feel like, more and more defend the humanities. But I think there's a way to bring in great questions to these other curriculums and cross curriculum. But I wonder how you would answer that. Ways to bring in the great questions to, maybe even like a STEM curriculum.
So Mark says, for philosophers, this is easy. All these questions are our bread and butter.
Yeah, it really is philosophy, and using philosophy to help students enter all sorts of texts.
Yeah, I see Ursula's answer. How do I know what I know is great in science? And Mark writes, these questions are the topics in my intro course. Joan Peterson writes, working on figuring that out, but I love the approach and hope that I can. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all so much for that.
Just want to add that if folks are interested in pursuing this more, the foundation does host numerous faculty seminars. And there's lots of opportunities. I took one seminar last summer. It's on Zoom. They provide free books that they mail to your house, and then you talk with other faculty across the country about how you would, and in other disciplines, how you would bring these texts into the classroom. So, and that's just one type of opportunity available through the foundation. So, just heads up, thumbs up, I guess.
Thank you, Ilsa. And I see that Joel has written, I love this and am much inspired by the way you framed great questions in the course redesign. It reminds me of how Alexander Michael Johns, I hope I pronounced that right, revised of the great books, focusing instead on great problems, but the scale of his work at the experimental college at Wisconsin and later at Berkeley always seemed like a stretch for a 2-year school, since that curriculum is really a big 4-year one. So thanks. Yeah, I think sometimes we do think that maybe it could be too rigorous for our students or present too much of a challenge, and we want to balance their, we want them to feel that they are an important part of our academic community. But I think these questions that they can answer with some confidence is a way of including them in that conversation.
I also really admired that in your approach. I likened it to a kind of contemplative approach where you're asking them to notice, you're asking them to take notes, what they observe, and then also then reflect. And you use the word evolving, and that it's an ongoing process in asking the great questions and discuss. And in a time right now, what I really valued about this discussion today is there is a lot of talk about AI and computers and the internet kind of upsetting critical thinking and becoming more of an obstacle than actually helping us. And that I feel like this really asks us all to slow down and get back to the basics, get back to just having a conversation, which I think in my own conversations in the English department, more and more that's becoming a challenging task, just to get students to make eye contact, to look at you, to think. And when you're asking them, no, what do you think? That's becoming more and more a radical question, I find, because so often you'll ask a question and they'll Google it. So I think this is really powerful, and I'm so grateful to hear you all talk about this.
Thank you so much, Allison. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to echo that because overall, what I think it's doing is bringing us back to the community of the classroom and building community in the classroom, especially in person, and to get the students, I guess, engaged with the whole intellectual idea of being in college, which I've always thought is the best part of it. Not that, oh, the degree is going to lead me to a job, but this is my time in life to uh, be brilliant, or try to be brilliant. And so to offer that all to the students in this way, I think helps us bring back everything, why we're doing what we're doing too. So it helps to refresh things too.
I see that Joan is asking a logistical question. Can this be done as a unit within a class, or does it require a whole semester approach?
Oh, I think it can definitely be done as a unit. Yeah, I think whatever works for you. And maybe you do it as a unit, and then the following semester you say, oh, let me try it for the whole course. I think that's really how the first time I did it, I kind of tested it out in my professional development semester of the fellowship. And this semester, I'm doing it for the whole semester.
And just another twist on that. So for the first unit in English 101, I have them do it, but without any assessment. So it becomes like we all kind of get used to this format and how it works. And then by unit 2, it becomes more of a regular occurrence in the classroom. And then by unit 3, I take more of an assessment approach towards their responsibility for being present and answering these questions and engaging with them.
Mark is asking, sometimes I worry, especially with difficult texts, that the community in the classroom will end up mirroring the broader community. The broader community is very polarized. Is there a concern that this will reinforce and recapitulate that? I think that the mirroring, like having students take notes on what each other is saying, actually does make them stop and listen, as opposed to what am I going to say as soon as this person is done talking, which is really how polarization operates, right? Because you're not really listening, you're not really engaging with what the person says. I haven't experienced that. I'm teaching this in an English 101 class. Students are pretty much out of high school and tend to be more reticent, maybe about expressing polarizing opinions, in my experience. Uh, but yeah, I think it does cause them to maybe take a beat and listen rather than just jump in. I don't know what other people's experience.
Most definitely. I agree with you, Susan. And also that time to ask each other questions in the smaller group with an emphasis on respectful and civil discourse gives them a much smaller audience. So a less, if someone does have sort of a bombastic opinion, kind of quells it a little bit. And then redirecting it to the larger classroom where the instructor is asking kind of like a ping pong match, like students to match up and talk about each other. I find it to be very peaceful, but again, it's for English 101. Yeah.
So Mark is also asking, should I be worried? And I think at least my answer to that is there's plenty of room for worry these days. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm always low key worried, I think, about that. But what can you do? We're teaching them intellectual engagement, and sometimes that can challenge preconceived notions or assumptions that they're coming into the environment with. And Maria is asking, based on your interactions with the folks at the Great Questions Foundation, do you see room for STEM faculty to enter this space and engage with the Great Questions approach? And I guess the answer off the top of my head is that this is really it's a humanities initiative, but I did notice that they had applications for social sciences. So I don't know, that's definitely something I could ask about, or we could ask about. What do you think, Ilsa?
Sure. If there's a way to bring the sciences in conversation with humanities, and for to be asked that question to the foundation, I think the founder would really appreciate that. Right. They've been looking for ways to expand and make their work valuable in community colleges. So they'd be very happy to hear what other faculty are interested in.
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea because I guess part of the argument with the Great Questions Foundation is that the humanities is at the heart of everything. You can't have science without your humanities. You can't have social science without your humanities. So, it all comes back to that. So we definitely want to thank everybody for attending. And thank you to Professor Lago. Thank you to Dr. Schrenemakers. Thank you to Dr. Cullen and to Barana. And thanks for spending some time with us this morning. And we hope to see you at the future events.